Joining me again this morning, welcome back, Deanna Booker, a consumer finance expert and the spokesperson for Consumer Credit Counseling Service of Maryland and Delaware. Again, pleasure to have you here.
It's always my pleasure.
Kids are leaving school. In fact, your daughter just graduated high school, I believe, right?
Yes, she did. Congratulations, Simone.
Well, at this time of year, it is a great time for us to sit down and discuss how we can work together to provide them with the financial knowledge and skills that they're going to need to succeed when they do graduate, maybe college, and they leave home for good. Some kids leave home after they graduate high school, too.
Right.
When it comes to financially educating young people, what do we need to know?
Jeff, I think the most important thing that we've got to recognize is that it means something that children of all ages, not just our high school graduates, but children of all ages can learn and need to learn financial and economic concepts. And the sooner they begin to absorb this information, the sooner they start to get it, the better chance they'll have to grow up as financially aware adults. And we've all got to play, as adults, an active part in this process. To be effective, I think that parents, educators, community groups like us, like Consumer Credit Counseling Service of Maryland and Delaware, we all need to band together to help children learn and apply. That's the key. Apply these crucial money management lessons that we're hoping that they get.
So why is it so important for kids to learn about personal finance as early as they possibly can?
Well, I think it's because today children encounter economic decisions at a really, really early age. There was just some information put out by the Media Education Foundation. They said that kids now spend more than $40 billion with a B of their own money each year, and they influence untold billions more in annual spending.
Wow.
And I think that a lot of it has to do with all of the exposure, thanks to cell phones, computers, TV.
Sure.
Right. Young people are so much more tied to the media, than they were in previous generations. But also, I think it's kind of a double-edged thing because on one hand, they have access to all these immense amounts of information. On the other hand, they're bombarded with thousands of commercial messages.
That's for sure.
Right. Every day. So I think if kids don't learn the difference between wants and needs while they're young, they can kind of end up in trouble as they get older.
So I've read that parents have the largest influence on kids' money management habits.
Sure.
Now, if that were necessarily true, my mom, who was a business teacher, would have done a much better job on me, I suppose. But what can parents do to ensure their children acquire necessary financial knowledge and skills?
Well, I think it helps for parents to start teaching these concepts as early as possible. Even very young children can learn age-appropriate financial lessons. For example, a child that's 2 or 3 years old, if you give them a choice between a penny, a dime, and a nickel, they're always going to choose the nickel. Why? Because it's bigger. But even though young children that young don't fully understand the value of money, they can learn the names of the coins and things like that. You can mold them starting that young. Also, I think parents can take advantage of daily activities. Here's another example. When children ask you to buy them candy or buy them toys, those are the perfect times to be discussing the difference between wants and needs with them. They might not want to hear it. You're laughing over there.
I've heard that conversation many times.
But it's a really great time to do it.
We all want things, Jeff. Thanks, Dad.
As soon as children are old enough, I think, to have money of their own, you want to, as parents, provide them a place, a piggy bank, even. Provide them a place where they can store it. You might even provide them with 3 different jars or 3 different banks. One that's for saving, one's for spending, one's for giving. You just want to help them understand all the ways that money's used.
A great way to get money in those jars or storage facilities, if you will, is an allowance. How can parents use an allowance as a teaching tool?
It's a great teaching tool. I think when children are 6, 7, 8 years old, it's a really good time to start giving them an allowance and showing them how to use it. You want to make sure, though, with allowance that you establish some clear ground rules. How often is the allowance going to be given? How much are you going to pay? Is the amount going to be tied to specific chores around the house? That sort of thing. And you also, with allowance, you want to encourage your child to set goals and to save a certain amount of the money that you give them. Young children's goals can be simple. They might, be expected to save for toys or save for other purchases that might be more than their week's allowance. The key really is, though, to teach them how to make informed decisions and to delay gratification. That way, they're going to be prepared, I think, for larger decisions when they come down the road.
Okay, we've all heard this before in our life. Money doesn't grow on trees.
Exactly.
How many times did your parents tell you that? Now, it is good advice. There's a point, though, when kids stop listening to that kind of thing.
Right.
How can you effectively talk with your kids about money?
I I think the secret is to make the discussions open, have them often, and whenever possible, make them fun. At dinner time, when you're going on a car trip, leisure activities, anytime you can hold these kind of relaxed discussions about personal financial topics. During these conversations, you want to make sure that you're encouraging your children to ask questions. Don't, give them a whole lot of economic mumbo jumbo, a whole lot of jargon. Offer up some age-appropriate examples, things that they can really connect to.
I don't have any children, but I do have a lot of friends that do it. And I've seen people do this in the past, talk with their kids about comparing prices, using back to school shopping as an example, saying, okay, this is the backpack that you want. Can we get it cheaper somewhere else? Let's take a look at these different places. What else can parents do with their children to actively promote this idea?
You're absolutely right. That's a perfect example. Children are more likely, I think, to retain and apply the money management lessons they learn in real life. So I think that we can treat every setting like a little personal finance laboratory, and we can tailor each activity to the age, to the interests of our child. Again, we might have 2 or 3-year-olds at home and they might love playing grocery store. So set up an imaginary store in the living room with your child. By exchanging money for goods, even though it's play, your child's going to begin to understand how commerce works. And I think those kinds of things are really good ideas. As children get older, you can make the lessons a bit more advanced. You might have your teenage son or daughter sit in while you're doing your monthly bill paying, session. This is going to give them an understanding of how much things really cost, and it works better, I believe, than just lecturing them.
I think it's great to talk about some of these activities, give some examples of things parents can do with their children. Now, I know, Deanna, you've been talking a little bit about age group 2 to 3-year-old situation here.
Right.
What about when they reach maybe 4 or 5 years of age?
I don't know. I think with children in that age range, maybe when you're going to the supermarket, because they're preschoolers at that point. So
Sure.
Have them help you clip coupons using safety scissors, of course. And when you're at the store, give your child the coupons. Ask her to keep an eye out for the products. This is going to make her feel like she's helping. It's also a great time to talk about saving money. What's the concept behind coupons? Most preschoolers, I think, would rather play imaginary restaurant at home than go out for a dinner. So again, this activity can teach a variety of skills: how to set the table, how to have good manners, but also how to make change. Sure. How to be the waitress, that sort of thing. You'll probably have to remind your child at some point to pay the bill after their pretend meal. But I think it's just about the concepts again. And once they start understanding, they're really going to get excited about paying with pretend money, making change, and it's all going to be clicking for them. They're going to be learning the lessons.
How about as the kids get towards elementary school? What can you do then?
Well, I think like we were talking about a minute ago, when your child is 6, 7, 8 years old, they're getting that allowance. They're going to need a place to put their money. So help your child open a savings account. Encourage him to make regular deposits into that account. As the balance grows, you can also talk with him about the concept of interest and how the bank pays people back for saving their money. Many banks have children's accounts that offer no fee, they don't require any kind of minimum balance, that sort of thing. So it's a good opportunity when a child is that age. It's also a good age to take up something like coin collecting, those kinds of hobbies that, again, are teaching kids those concepts. Visit the kids section at the U.S. Mint website. Learn about how U.S. currency evolved. There's also all kinds of games and things to do on the site. Again, just so it clicks for your child at whatever age they are, whatever interests them.
Let's move forward in our time machine a little bit further here. Talk about older elementary school children. I'm thinking maybe like 3rd grade to 5th grade, ages 9 to 12 kind of thing.
I think that's a good time to focus on comparison shopping. When you go to the store, encourage them to read the store's price label on an item like, something like paper towels. Look at the size and the price. Figure out the bulk amount per cent and all that kind of thing. Also talk with them about the role quality plays in, the decisions that they make when it comes to purchasing things. You might also ask your child that's of that age range to help you put together a yard sale. It's a good time to get them to clean out the attic, go into the garage, go into their closets. And with a little supervision, they can decide on how much to charge for each item, help you, haggle with customers over prices. Again, it's about concepts. And I think as the children age, different concepts make more of a difference.
All right, we're flying through this. The kids are growing up right before before our very eyes. What kind of activities would appeal to those children in their early teens? There's not much appeals to people in their early teens.
Exactly.
So this is tough.
I think one of the things, though, that might appeal to them when they get to that age is the stock market.
Okay.
I think kids at that age might be ready. Oftentimes, they're ready to learn about the stock market. So you want to check to see if your school participates in the Maryland stock market game. This competition gives young investors a chance to learn how the stock market works, and I think it's a great idea. Junior high, senior high, throughout the state, all schools, all kinds of schools take part. The activity is sponsored by the Maryland Council on Economic Education, which, by the way, is one of our partners at Consumer Credit Counseling. The council holds a financial poster contest for elementary school students, a personal finance challenge for high schoolers. So there are a lot of opportunities out there for kids that age. In the personal finance challenge, the students get a chance to increase their money management knowledge by competing in sort of a quiz bowl. So it's a really great opportunity. And you can learn more about them. You can visit the council's website. Their address is www.econed.org.
Okay, so now that we're through with the early teens activities, now our kids are really getting to that point where they're almost ready to head out the door and leave home to go out on their own. What financial survival skills do young adults need to know before they do make that step?
There's so many. I think, though, a good place to start, if you haven't already, by the time your kids are that age, if you haven't already helped them set up a personal budget, now is the best time to do it. And just as a little side note, Consumer Credit. we have an interactive budget worksheet on the financial tools page of our website at www.cccs-inc.org. I try to get that in as much as I can.
You do a great job.
But you want to work with them on setting up that budget, help them total up their income, figure out how much they can afford to spend each month on major expenses like food, rent, utilities, transportation, that sort of thing. You want to really stress to your young adult that and emphasize that budgeting is a work in progress and it requires discipline and regular review. They really have to pay attention to it. You also want to help them see how budgeting makes it possible to set and achieve the goals that they might have, whether they're short-term goals or long-term goals. Budgeting is really key on getting to those goals. For young adults who are 18 or over, CCCS offers free confidential budget counseling. We can help you or your child, or you and your child, make a financial assessment and set up a budget. It's a really great resource if your child is preparing, like you said, to head out to college or starting his or her first job. It's something that they really need to know.
When our children hit that young adult range, a word that really starts to come into play a lot is the word credit. What do young adults need to know when it comes to credit?
Whoa, they just got to know how credit works. They have to understand that every time they use that credit card, they are making a loan that has to be repaid. If your child doesn't already have a credit card, use an actual credit card statement, maybe of yours, to help demonstrate to them how it works. Explain to them things like APR, what it means, how interest accumulates anytime a payment isn't made on the full balance. Talk with them about why it's important to always make more than the minimum payments. Let them know how missing a payment or making late payments is going to affect their credit rating. Explain to them that a person's payment history is the single most important factor when it comes to their credit score, and that a lack of payment can make it much harder to buy a home down the road or get a car or rent a place, that sort of thing. So they really just have to understand how it works.
What resources are available out there for parents who want to learn more about personal finance?
Well, we at Consumer Credit Counseling Service of Maryland
You
and
don't
Delaware
say. Oh, that's great.
just so happen to have a variety of free educational materials in the resource section of our website. Listeners can visit the site. It's www.cccs-inc.org. They'll find podcasts, self-directed online courses on all sorts of topics, including how to afford college, how to repay student loans, avoiding identity theft, understanding credit reports, all kinds of great information. Parents who might need help getting their own finances, under control can also take advantage of our free confidential budget and credit counseling. We offer help at our offices throughout the surrounding area and by phone. They've just got to call 1-800-642-2227 to set up an appointment. I think the more that all of us learn, the better prepared we all are to set a good example and teach our children the lessons that they need to succeed.
As always, fantastic having you in here. Tons tons and tons of great information. If you'd like to find out more, you can find so much of it at cccs-inc.org. Deanna Booker, consumer finance expert and the spokesperson for Consumer Credit Counseling Service of Maryland and Delaware. Thank you so much once again for coming by.
It's always my pleasure.